Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Returning to the show tonight is Jamie Lee. The discussion with Jamie was wide-ranging as we discuss how ground-based infrastructures such as NextRad and rapid evaporation techniques plays a significant role in the creation of the strange and in many cases severe weather conditions experienced around the world. And so without further ado, here's the conversation with Jamie. So, Jamie, welcome back to the show, and we have a lot to talk about today. You have been on a rampage with your uploads on YouTube, and I have been putting many of them up on my blog, and very, very interesting stuff, talking about the CRISPR technology, also the weather and geoengineering, specifically that perhaps the geoengineering is necessary because the climate or the weather has already been damaged. I know a lot of people, as we had mentioned, or I had mentioned to you before we got started here, in the geoengineering community don't want to hear that theory. They don't want to hear that potentiality. They want to just shut it down. But we'll talk about that, and maybe some folks will have some ears. And then we could talk maybe a little bit about, if we have some time, about nanofood, something else that is out there that most people know nothing about, but it's continuing to march forward, and it has consequences. And maybe we could talk about that. But before we get started, I just want to ask you, I know you released 2 books going back a few months ago, your Flat Earth book and your geoengineering book. So how are they doing?
Flat Earth book's doing really well. I put it on a PDF and listed it for free on my websites, tabooblog.com and a plain PLANE truth.info. And so you can get those for free and download it and look for yourself. But so far it's been really good responses, and people have been really kind about buying the books when I ask them to support it. And the geoengineering books aren't selling as well because I haven't really publicized it. And like you said, Mike, and it's not a subject people really is warm and fuzzy subject to talk about, that the climate has collapsed, that the climate has been collapsed for a long time. That coal being used for 100, 120 years, polluting the atmosphere. And if we do live in a dome in an enclosed environment, what do you think the coal has done to our environment for such a long time? And so that has been a subject I've been studying since I first met Dane Wigington in 2005 and bought some property from him and got to learn about chemtrails. And that's led me on this journey to observe and investigate and understand what geoengineering is, what chemtrails is. And then this past, just the past few months, I got in touch with a gentleman who runs a website called Weather Wars 101, WW 101, and he was professing a much greater magnitude of weather modification, including ground-based devices, including NextRad, next generation radar, Doppler radar, that manipulates the weather on a worldwide scale. And wherever you live these days, you're seeing weather out of control, whether it be the intensity of the sun, where we've measured the UVB ratings being 1,000% over what the EPA has been recording, and that's why the sun feels more intense. We're seeing paint peeling in rapid rates here. We're seeing skin cancers increasing radically. And then we also have the other effects of a heating climate. We're here in California. We've set record temperatures, and record temperatures are going year after year after year. And that is because the climate has collapsed and they're having to geoengineer the world weather. And we can get into actually how they're doing that. And I just give a shout out to Weather War 101. His story, he has no voice. He can't speak. So he's been putting out these videos, over 300 of them for, 3 years now, trying to tell people what he's learned about weather modification and a collapsed climate. And what he's written talked about has made total sense to me now once I'm seeing this all with new set of eyes.
Yeah. No, I'm very familiar with his channel, and I posted a lot of his videos over time to put his material out there so people could take a look and understand, or at least get a different perspective on what could very well be going on. And I know we'll get into that. And I am leaning in his direction, Jamie, just so you know, and I have been for a long time, that perhaps, as you had mentioned, that our climate has collapsed and we don't have any natural weather or climate anymore, that it actually has to be manufactured. And a lot of what we're seeing today is the result of having to manufacture that weather. So we'll get into that. But the one thing I wanted to kick off with, we have the fortune of talking today on August 21st, and it is the day of the solar eclipse. And I was wondering if you could just give your thoughts on whether it is actually the moon, or there was a video that Santos Bonacci had put out. It's not the moon, that we have another celestial body known as Rahu. Some will refer to it as the black sun. It's a disk that moves in front of our sun, and that is what's causing the eclipse, the solar eclipse. So what are your thoughts on that? I know that the geocentric camp is divided on that. Most are still focusing on the moon as being the object that moves in front of the sun. And then there is another camp, I think it's a much smaller camp, that is looking into Rahu, or that type of celestial body that has nothing to do with the moon.
Here in California, we haven't been able to observe anything because we've had a blanket of gray over this Northern California where I live, and I hear it's also been up in Washington as well, where we haven't seen the sun. I mean, it's 4:15 my time, and it's still gray here, and it's August. So seeing the eclipse has been out of the question. But I got to give credit to Eric Dubé initially when he started talking about the luminous moon and started talking about the black Rahu back in 2015. Which he in his work, he goes through all the history of the ancient civilizations and the thousands of years of their theocosmology, talking about the black Rahu, and they have it in their legend and lore. They have statues of the sun eating the moon, or the moon eating the sun, in all its glory, in many different religions, from the Native American Indians, Native Americans, through to the Vedics, to the Indian astrology. Here in the Indian astrology, Rahu is the eternal enemy of the sun and the moon, and he's the third celestial body that eclipses them. He catches them by surprise and only comes out when the moon is full. Well, what are we seeing today? We're seeing a new moon next conjuncting with the sun. Now think about this for a sec. You've got the sun out and you've got a new moon sitting next to it. Why is the moon not lit?
Right.
Then you've also got a syzygy, it's called, which is for the heliocentric model, says you have to have three balls in a row, the sun, the moon, and the earth, in order to cause the shadow, which is said to cause the eclipse. Well, the problem with that is the moon and the sun are up there and we're down here. That's a triangle. It's not syzygy. There's not three in a row. Then the heliocentrists go on to say, well, the moon is going counter trend. It's not going east to west. It's going west to east, which makes no sense at all. So immediately the heliocentric theory makes no sense. But then you get into the history of Rahu, and back to the Indian astrology. It's depicted in art as a serpent with no body riding a chariot drawn by 8 black horses. It's paired with Ketu, which coincides in astrology with the dragon's heads, the dragon head and the dragon tail you see in astrology. And every time you see in astrology an eclipse, you will see the dragon's head within 4 degrees. And this ties into what Santos Bonacci was saying, is that there are 7 elements of the eclipse, the third celestial body, which is actually causing the eclipse that is occurring today, that is discussed in ancient legend and lore, but is not discussed in today's teachings. And I just find that fascinating. And then at the very end of Mr. Dubé's breakdown of Rahu, he includes the Jesuit symbol with the sun, and there you see in the sun right there, you see the seven celestial bodies which Santos Bonacci was referring to, which I just looked at the other day and went, holy cow, it's right there in front of us. So this is stuff we're not taught about, but it makes total sense that there is a much more spiritual consciousness going on with the eclipse going on today. I could feel it. I felt a heightened sense of energy and also kind of nervousness. And I just sat down and meditated for a while and just kind of contemplated what it all meant. But I don't know. I'm just learning this stuff too.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to learn, especially when you were never taught. So we're playing catch up. Right. So, I just wanted to get your perspective on that. Here, we were able to see the eclipse. I was a little concerned in the morning because the eclipse was to start, and it did at 1:16 p.m. on Eastern Standard Time. And the full eclipse, we were going to see 94%, was at 2:45 p.m. But like I said, I was getting concerned, Jamie, because in the morning, they started spraying the heck out of the skies. I was waiting for a whiteout. It was kind of getting there, and then it did dissipate, and we had a clearing. Now, we had that kind of that aerosol mist where the sky is not really blue. It's kind of a powder blue.
That's the barium salt that causes that white opaque haze, which we have over us all the time now.
Yeah, well, we had that. We have it all the time here, and it was there today. In fact, I always tell friends and people I speak to that want to listen or are interested in geoengineering that here in North Carolina, they spray all the time. I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's a special day when we don't have any spraying taking place. And I think over the last couple of years, maybe the last 2 or 3 years, I can remember maybe 3 or 4 days straight where there was no spraying. That's it. Just 3 or 4 days, and that didn't happen very often. Other than that, virtually every single day they're spraying the skies of North Carolina.
Yeah, very interesting about, I've been really putting a lot of effort into my YouTube channel. And it's really wonderful the way the community is responding in the comment sections, because people are reporting around the world about the spraying going on in their areas. And people today were reporting that they couldn't see it because of the spraying of the skies and the chemtrails they weren't able to see. But we're getting all this feedback from around the world that this isn't just happening in North Carolina. This isn't happening in Northern California. This is a worldwide operation that has been going on for decades and decades, and it's getting much more intense. And so is the sun. And so I use the term intensity when I describe the sun, not heat, because that UVB, it's more intense on our skin. It's more intense feeling. And because, whether it's an ozone layer or not, we have created a changing world that's changing extremely rapidly. And according to Weather War 101, it's gotten so out of control, they are in desperate mode. And you and I were talking before the show about last week about New Orleans having a Katrina event last week, and they're having another big rain going on now, and it wasn't even being reported in the news at all. And I had to do some research to find out that they had 20 inches of rain in an hour, and all but one of their pumps failed, and people were desperately crying for help. But you weren't seeing this reported on the news. You're not seeing it reported by anybody. And then we're having fires up in Alaska like crazy, up in Siberia like crazy. Alberta, Canada, as we talked about, had some fires that were spooky in the way they were shown to cause absolute devastation in some areas, an absolute pristine environment right next door. And we're conjecturing that possibly could have been caused by directed energy weapons. But the point being is the weather has gone out of control in ways that none of us could even imagine in these days. And so it's literally a life or death to keep the world cooled off enough. And Weather War 101 has been great about covering this and chronicling with his videos how this is occurring everywhere around the world.
One of the things I've noticed, Jamie, is they continually lie about the actual temperature. The National Weather Service will say that it's 90 degrees here in North Carolina, but I also have a temperature gauge that measures the temperature outside, and the monitor is sitting in the shade. It's under the awning of my front porch, and it will say 95 or 96. And I have seen it very consistently where the temperature that is being reported as the official temperature is understated. And I absolutely agree with you that when you step outside, in fact, I mentioned this to Rebecca. We went to lunch to meet up with some friends, and when we stepped outside, we were walking back to the car. I said to her, "It is really hot out here." I said, "Can't you just feel it on your face?" And she says, "Yeah, it's really hot." And she says, "What? How hot is it?" So we took a look, and it said 92 degrees, but the intensity on the skin, it just did not feel normal. So I'm with you on the fact that something is really, really up, and I'm not just talking about the traditional geoengineering activism. I think that something has really gone wayward. 20 inches of rain in an hour. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous, and it's not being reported. 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, if it rained someplace 20 inches, almost 2 feet in 1 hour, it would have been on the media, on the news, right? So why don't we do this? Did you want to go into CRISPR technology first, or did you want to just roll right into the weather?
Well, yeah, to finish on what you were saying too, I recommend and highly advise people to go to their hardware store and buy a thermal laser gun. You can get them on Amazon. Don't want to promote Amazon, but you can get one for $16. And I don't know if you know what those are, but it's basically a little thermal laser gun. You shoot it and it measures the temperature. And you can go out now and you can measure the temperature of metal and you can measure the temperature of your car. And what you're talking about being 92 degrees is the ambient temperature. But we go outside and we're getting temperature readings. I've been playing tennis with my son and it'll be 84 degrees, Mike. And I'll go on the tennis court. It'll be 125. Now, I grew up playing tennis and the difference in temperature we measured was 10 to 12 degrees on the courts. And now we're getting ambient temperatures and differences of 30 to 40 degrees that anyone can measure for themselves. And this is why I talk about the intensity of the sun. It is much more intense and like you feel on your skin. And I was out with my girlfriend and we were having lunch and the waiter was complaining about the deck peeling, the paint peeling, and they had just painted it last year. This is a new paradigm shift in all that's going on. Last week, we had the Luciferian heat wave all across Europe. Did you hear about that? Temperatures all across there were hitting in the 110s, record temperatures by not just 1 degree, not just 2 degrees, but 5 and 8 degrees. And you're absolutely right. I'm looking at the newspapers every day, and they're not reporting the weather across the world on anywhere near what is being reported by outside sources. And this is where alternative news, I think, is making a huge difference. And they're bringing light to this, and newspapers and the news broadcasters, and Trump wasn't down in Katrina like Bush was doing, heck of a job. Remember that, the guy, heck of a job, Brown or whoever that guy was. And it's just being ignored, and these poor people are suffering and being flooded out again, and they have no voice. And so, with your work and mine, hopefully we're bringing attention to this. But yeah, the temperatures being underreported. I'm a farmer. Our food is going freaky. My figs didn't produce fruit. My cherry plums didn't produce. I mean, they're just prolific every year. Nothing is growing. My apples are super small this year. A lot of apple trees where we live up in Anderson Valley area is dying off. People are, all the apple farmers are trying to think it's because of the heat. And, we had 5 years in California of the greatest drought in the history of California, followed by the greatest rain and snow in the history of California 1 year later. Now, how the heck can that happen? Yeah. Well, what Weather War 101 has, and they called it the atmospheric river. And I don't know if you saw in my video, I chronicled a Today Show meteorologist, whatever a meteorologist is, meteor. They're making up 10 new clouds. They were announcing of 10 new clouds that just all of a sudden appeared. Well, how do new clouds appear if the weather isn't going artificial and nuts? So, Weather Wars has come up with this postulated, and he was a wide area network installation technician, and he started noticing that where weather was being created inland over Mississippi, over Tennessee, and he goes, how can weather start being created inland? And he started identifying what's called wet surface air coolers, or WSAC. And what these are power plants. You can see as nuclear power plants or other type of energy power plants. I think there's some 12,000 or so in the United States, or maybe larger than that worldwide. But what these devices are water vapor generators on a massive scale, using tons and tons and millions of gallons of water. And they're creating water vapor. And you can see these. Once you start looking for them, you'll see them where you live or around you. And they're huge steam vaults that release massive amounts of water vapor into the air. Now, why are they creating water vapor? What is the purpose? Well, it's because we've destroyed the environment. We no longer have weather, so we must create weather. So the water surface air coolers go up into the environment. And they have to make them above 300 feet tall, because if they don't, it creates local fog of a super intensity. And you can also go on NASA's website, and they'll show you these water vapor machines and show how they're making rain. They show how they're doing it. It's not hard science. They just need to use it to put it up in the air. And then the chemtrail spraying, and what most geoengineering and chemtrail sites will not talk about, is barium salt. Why don't I went through all the websites I could and typed in barium salt, and I could not find why barium salt is being used other than the detrimental effects to health. Well, it turns out that barium salt is critical to combine with the water vapors that are pushed up to the sky to create what's called cloud condensation nuclei, or CCN. And CCN is the almost molecular level of rain molecule. And since we've been polluting the environment, especially if we live in a closed environment, for over 100 years with coal, with 14 million planes flying, with billions of cars driving, what do you think we've done to our environment, folks? We've messed it up to irreplaceable and irreparable dimensions. And so with the cloud condensation nuclei is needed to artificially bond with the barium salt, and then the water vapors are the rain creating. And so what they do on the inland areas is they pass these water vapors from station to station using Doppler radar. And Doppler is those golf ball things you see everywhere. It's also called NEXRAD for Next Generation Radar. And Weather War 101 chronicles how these have been in use since the 60s and 70s. And they steer the weather. And they pass it from one to another, creating greater rain, greater rain. And so he chronicles just over and over again over these areas where you see the weather being created, the artificial weather. You see him being steered with the Doppler radar. He shows a different schematic that showed, and he shows how it just pulverized New Orleans last week, absolutely destroyed it with these man-made machines that are only inland. So to get back to California, here we went from 5 years of drought, and they had a real problem with the drought in California, is they could not make it rain because there's none of these wet surface air coolers out in the Pacific Ocean. Bill Gates, back in 2009, had a conference up in Seattle, where Microsoft is, on what's called the Silver Lining Project. And these were ocean-based water vapor machines using salt water. And they were developing these things to create the water vapors so that they could bring the weather in off the Pacific Ocean from Hawaii. Weather War 101 said you'll have to have too many of those. But he's also showing how they're steering the weather in one of his videos down in San Diego 3 weeks ago. They had a tropical storm that just came out of nowhere and was very localized in certain areas, but was very profound in its intensity, up to 70, 80 mile an hour winds and a bunch of rain. And he shows how they steered the weather up from Mexico, and it went counter trend, counter cyclical to the prevailing winds and the prevailing jet stream. This is how bad it's gotten, that they have to bring weather up from Mexico and steer it to California to cool us off. And then last year, they created this atmospheric river with the new technology. And the rain that came down here, Mike, it wasn't rain. I mean, I've been living outdoors almost all my life. This was not rain. This was just a cloud. And then all of a sudden, just sheets of rain just dropped. It was very, very strange.
Some may not be familiar with how and where weather is supposed to form. So could you take the audience through that? I mean, it's supposed to take place over water. And what Weather War 101 is explaining and what he's showing is it's not coming together over water. It's actually forming over land, which is unnatural.
The hydrological cycles are always created around water. The water vapors go up into the atmosphere. The atmosphere creates the water molecules that combine with the cloud condensation nuclei to create rain. And then the storm systems get cyclical in nature, and they move in onshore or over lakes and whatnot. But in his videos, you can clearly see they're coming out of nowhere until you look, and where he chronicles and he shows you these Doppler NEXRAD radar stations are, and these water surface air cooling stations are that are generating it. And he shows the locale, and you can clearly see that this is what is occurring. And so there's just, it's what do they call it? Priori evidence that this is what's happening, but it's not being disseminated by the chemtrail and geoengineering sites. And I don't know why they're not promoting it. And then the other falsehood they're promoting is the HARP technology. All you hear is about HARP, HARP, HARP. And I'm harping on it. But you don't hear about NEXRAD. You don't hear about Doppler using their 750,000 watts of power per station to direct these energies. I mean, this is Tesla technology on steroids.
Now, Jamie, if I understand Weather War 101's premise correctly, what he's saying is that the weather has already, or the weather cycle, the climate cycle, has been permanently damaged. And what's going on now is the manufacturing of the weather. through these ground-based systems is necessary because without it, we wouldn't have any weather. Now, I know a lot of people have a very, very hard time getting their heads wrapped around that. In fact, when I broached this topic with other anti-geoengineering activists in the past, they got very upset because they said, hey, look, Mike, that's exactly what the controllers want us to believe. What they want us to believe is that they have to do this because if they don't do it, in other words, if they do not geoengineer, then we're going to have this apocalyptic environment where there is no water, there is no hydration. So basically, Earth becomes a gigantic desert. So this becomes a very, very complex discussion to have because you have really good people in the geoengineering activist community who are trying to get all this geoengineering stopped. And then we have this other school of thought now that says, well, if you stop it, then the consequences are going to be extremely dire. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's a conversation I have with people who are up to speed on this stuff all the time. Do we have to start wanting this to be happening? Do we want to start for life to continue on? That we continue to manipulate weather or else? I mean, it's big boy stuff conversation to tell you, when you get into this, and no one wants to say, well, and so that's why that's why everybody denies it. No one wants to deal with the fact that through our consumerism, through this lack of concern and treating Earth as a sewer and a supply house solely, I mean, people forget that Earth gives life. That's the basic humanity's fault, is that we don't understand that Earth gives us life. You destroy Earth, you destroy life. Well, Earth is going to be around for a lot longer than we are. And I'm under I agree with Mr. Wigginton that just let it happen. Stop the geoengineering. Stop putting all these chemicals, aluminum and all this stuff through the blood-brain barrier, causing Alzheimer's, causing dementia. Good for big pharma. And then also we have to bring up the fact about dumb underground bunkers. Deep underground military bunkers, or DUMB, have been gopher holed throughout the entire United States and Europe and everywhere else. And so they being the powers that be, can go underground while the weather gets destroyed and come back out when it gets more benign and more, so is this part of their plan, or is it out of, I'm going to the conversation now of, is it part of their plan to keep engineering the weather because this is their plan, or has it gotten so out of control they're in desperation mode to keep the weather from destroying all life as it exists today?
Yeah, so that's my question, Jamie. Is it at a point now where the climate cycle is permanently damaged and we're at the point of no return, so they have to do these things in order to have some semblance of weather? Or no, that is not true. The weather is not permanently damaged, or the climate cycle is not permanently damaged. And so what we're seeing is, well, we're back to where most anti-geoengineering activists are at, I think, in the community, where, no, it's part of an overall agenda to militarize the sky, to be able to put their depopulation agenda into place, and all those other issues that we know very well. They are the conventional, traditional anti-geoengineering activists' list of concerns that we should have about what's going on in our skies. So based on your research, where do you think we're at with this? Are we on the side of the equation which says that the weather is permanently damaged or not?
Well, go to the Georgia Guidestones. I mean, go look at in Alberton County, at 2 hours north of Atlanta. And I actually got on a plane, even though I don't want to fly, and flew to see the Georgia Guidestones, because number one says reduce these are, for people that don't know, the Georgia Guidestones were erected in 1991 by a representative named R.C. Christian. And they erected four huge, they're 19, 20 feet tall. They weigh over 3 tons, and they're in kind of a cross fashion. They're in 8 different modern languages, and there's a capstone on top in ancient Sanskrit, Hebrew, cuneiform, and one other ancient language. And basically, they're 10 commandments. They're also known as American Stonehenge. And number one says reduce the population by 95% down to 500 million people. And it's basically a one world government protocol. Well, what have we been hearing about the New World Order and one world governments? So are they calling their shots? Well, certainly they put a monument that is going to stand the test of time, saying that they need to reduce the population, and someone spent tens of millions of dollars. And my feeling, I mean, this was by a farm and kind of in the middle of nowhere on a little rise and stuff, but there was serious intention behind these Georgia Guidestones being put up. There's astrological things in there. There's all these different variations. There's they had a time capsule put in there and many other things that are very intricate that to go there and see. Vigilant Citizen has a really good breakdown on this. So, it's an intellectual question, but when you see the weather changing as fast as it is, when you see food not growing, when you listen to Henry Kissinger say, with his NSM document 2000 saying, control the food, control the people. And now you see, maybe this is a nice segue to get into synthetic foods, but you're seeing that all over the place where we don't have any normal food anymore. The word organic has been bastardized, and synthetic food, we're not even told that what they don't even label what is in our food anymore. And it's much worse than people understand. And people, I'm telling you that the children are taking the short end of the stick. They're the worst off here in the United States. We rank 38th in the quality of healthcare and number one in cost. We have children that are sicker today than they've ever been. 1 in 2, 3 children are obese. 1 in 4 have allergies, autism, ADHD, and allergies. This has never happened before. And it was right in the introduction with GMO foods. It was right in the introduction with bioengineered nano foods, right in the introduction with vaccines back right before the year 2000. It coincides exactly with that. So, ...
Yeah. So let me just back up 1 second, though. When we talk about Weather War 101, is his position that they have permanently damaged the weather cycle, that it's collapsed, that it's done and it's gone, and that they have to do what they're doing in order to have some semblance of weather? Is that his position?
Yeah, I do know. He says for 4 decades at least, 5 decades, half a century, he says.
He's saying that there is no more natural weather, not because they're preventing it. They screwed it up 4 or 5 decades ago. And so they have to do what they're doing today in order to have some semblance of weather today. Am I right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there's a document in one of his workings, and I also included it in my video back from 1971 with the first wet surface air coolers that were being put into Illinois. And they described all the detrimental effects of the towers being too low, creating the fog and all this. And then all of a sudden the whole piece was blanked out and you couldn't find it anymore, but he saved it. And there's been another document relating to that talks about all the engineering they're doing back in 1971. And so, yes, he absolutely believes that he uses the words climate collapse. And I'm using that term too. Because when you look at the world weather, when you see the wet surface air coolers and the Doppler radar, NEXRAD systems, and you understand how the barium salt works for chemtrailing, and chemtrailing is going around the world everywhere except for the 3 countries we talked about, it's a no-brainer to say, hey, yeah, it has collapsed because they're in panic mode. And they're having to do this, but, he's been saying it's been going on for 40, 50 years.
So what would happen under his premise if they just stopped spraying? What would happen?
Well, I think we go into what Dane talks about, the Venus effect. I mean, what I'm getting when I talked about the thermal lasers, when I go out here, I've got a park across the street where I go for walks and stuff. And I took my little thermal laser and I was measuring everything. And the baseball field had the light poles. And I was measuring then, it was 86 degrees out. But I'm going, wow, the light poles are going to be really hot. And they were about 112, 114. But the ground, the dirt was 120. The dirt was hotter than the metal. And what this is telling me is that the earth is taking the vibrational heat and it's reflecting back from not only up in the sky, but reflecting back from the earth. And this is the earth heating. And this is why we're seeing the oceans heating. This is why we're seeing die-off and the acidification of all the oceans, because everything's heating up and it's become basically a convection oven. And if you add into the geocentric, that we're in a closed dome, it makes total sense that we've created this convection oven that if they were to stop doing what they're doing, game over.
Well, that's why they keep talking about solar radiation management, right? I mean, it's as I'm listening to this and having watched a lot of Weather War 101 stuff, his material over time, what they're doing is, I mean, it's a cover your ass situation where they're talking about, oh, we have to stop global warming. If he's right, if Weather War 101 is right, the reason why they're going down this path and they're selling geoengineering and talking about this is because they have screwed it up. And they can't step forward and say, oh, by the way, we have been screwing with the weather and the atmosphere since whenever. And we destroyed weather patterns. We destroyed the natural cycle of weather. So now we have to do it artificially. So that begs the question, Jamie, if they actually had the balls to step forward and say something like that, what would that do to the geoengineering community? I would think that all of a sudden, everything that everybody's been working on and talking about would come to a dead standstill. I see it as a very, very perplexing problem if Weather War 101 is correct. Extremely perplexing.
Well, let me ask you a question that I ask myself a lot, and I've asked other people. If humanity has caused the earth to change so much and the die-off we're seeing, plant life, flora, fauna, animals, and whatnot, and it's caused by humans' anthropogenic consumerism over 100 years. I mean, we just increased coal capacity production by 17% this year. We're not even taking our foot off the gas. And then we're doing this massive debt, on the United States, 22 trillion in current debt. And no one can tell you what $1 trillion is. So they got their foot on the gas. And I just find that the chemtrail and geoengineering community, they're not learning like they used to. I mean, this information has now been out for months, and they're still promoting this solar radiation management. The aluminum's reflecting back to cool off the earth, but it's necessary. It's a bunch of baloney. That's not why they have the aluminum. The aluminum is up there to help direct the radar systems, folks. It's not to reflect it, but the solar radiation management is a baloney. And if I can figure it out, these other much smarter guys than me can figure it out. Nobody's getting it. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to get it. We've been screaming from the rooftops now, and it's really disheartening. My books, I give my books out. My family won't even read my books. They do not want to know. It's just like, why ruin my buzz? And life is priceless. And, hey, it can't be that bad. Well, what if it is, folks? And now they're just not going to be able to deny it anymore. They're not going to be able to say, well, something wild has happened to the environment. And so I think we're going to have this mass awakening, and it'll come too late. It's just the bigger picture stuff. And this is where I have to get spiritual and understand that we incarnated to deal with these times, to step up to the plate and to step up to the biggest, excuse my French, mofos that the world has ever seen in the past thousands of years. This goes back to Babylonian days. This is why you have Albert Pike in the Washington D.C. with the mausoleum, who was a Ku Klux Klan creator, one in Arkansas and whatnot, and he's the only Confederate general. You see him tipping over all these soldiers' statues of Confederates, but you won't see him tipping over the Freemason Albert Pike statue right in the heart of Washington D.C. Why? Because he's the guy that predicted all the 3 world wars. He's the guy that predicted and said that we're going to have 3 world wars. And the 3rd World War is going to be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the Illuminati and the Agent Tur, between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the true, pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. Well, who is Lucifer? Lucifer is light. Lucifer is heat. So what are we seeing? We're seeing he predicted that the Second World War, that communism was going to be weakened. He predicted the First World War was going to be about Russia and getting Russia under control. I mean, this man wrote this 100 years ago, and he said it's going to take 100 years for the fruition to come about. He wrote in 1875, I believe. So we're seeing the prophecies of him and Adam Weishaupt and these others.
On the protocols of Zion, right?
And the protocol, this is the protocols that gentleman, which I highly recommend this book if you want to get into the whole spirituality of it, by a gentleman named William Guy Carr, who was an admiral in the Canadian Navy. Have you heard of him at all? He wrote Red Fog Over America and Pawns in the Game. So his son just finished a book called Satan, Prince of the World, because William Carr died in 1959 but left a manuscript to be written. And you can read the Luciferian Creed, and he breaks down all of this, and we're seeing it happen in live in front of us as he described it back from 1960. He saw it happening. And so this is the very slow boil that we see going on, literally, and it's coming to fruition, and it's heating up everywhere. But it's a spiritual war. They do not want our souls to incarnate. They want to end all incarnation of souls so that they can control world domination over everyone, and they can have their way. And so we're seeing Baphomet statues being put up in Detroit. These 1.5 ton statues of the devil, of Satan, of Lucifer they tried to put one in Oklahoma City. Why are they doing this? Well, they're having their way with us. We're slaves to their system. We're slaves to, and they know it. And now they don't even care anymore. They're letting us talk about them and promote them, and they know they've won. So this is where, courage comes in. This is where knowing that we're coming back again to fight. And so if we're coming back again, I want to start fighting the war now. I want to get after these guys right now so that my son and their children's children will have a chance.
Yeah, no, you have to fight this thing. And if you have a conscience, you have to fight this thing. I don't know what to say, Jamie, because we have at least 50% I'll talk about the population in the United States. We have at least 50% that are just lost, completely lost in duality world. And then you've got, another maybe 25% that they care somewhat, but they really don't know what to do, and they have other things in life that occupy their time, and so they can't focus on the things that you're focusing on, or myself, or anybody else that's trying to do this work and trying to get it communicated out. The actual number of people that are stepping up to the plate and swinging hard is very, very small. It's very small. And so I think the mistake that a lot of people make in the truth community and the alternative research community is that, we have a network of people that we speak to, and that becomes our circle of friends in our network. And we get duped into believing that because we're talking amongst ourselves and we're sharing our ideas and insights, that there's actually some mass awakening taking place. And in reality, no, what you're doing is you're preaching to the choir. You're talking to like-minded people, but that portion of like-minded people is a very, very small percentage of the population. And that's what I think a lot of people really have to start getting their heads wrapped around. It's, I don't know. I know this sounds like a doomsday type of show here, but, I like to say that doing this for years, it has now become, it's reality. When you walk around and you talk to people and you try to get them to understand about the weather, when you try to get them to understand about vaccines and flu shots and GMO and fluoride, they don't want to know. They do not want to know. And they don't care. And they think you're a kook. They think I'm a kook. Everything's going to be okay because we put a new head in the Oval Office in the White House, right? So, I don't know.
No, I'm right with you, and it's heartbreaking, Michael. And every day I wake up with the pit of my stomach, feeling at unease, and everybody keeps asking me the same question. Well, what can we do about it? What can we do? And I keep telling them this is an inward journey, folks. This is going inside yourself to take all this information in and keep looking into the darkness and shine your bick into the darkness. Shine your light because they can't hide anymore, and raise the collective consciousness of the world. And what I'm finding, and it's giving me a little bit of hope, is through my websites and my blogs and the comments, I posted something about Agenda 21 the other day, and I included a clip that was on Rosa Corey, that was on Alex Jones, whatever his Prison Planet site.
Yeah.
I got more abuse for having an Alex Jones, but I got started on David Icke and Alex Jones. I mean, those guys brought me to the fold and started educating me with Bohemian Grove and all this stuff. And then we moved forward. So I think the rising consciousness, at the lead of this, we're all raising our consciousness. And that is of the ethereal level. This is the Aquarian mind. This is where we're heading. It's a Saturnian Aquarian mind. We're heading from Pisces into Aquarian, and it's of the mind, but it's Saturn. It's hard lessons. We've got to learn our hard lessons. Atlantean, they destroyed themselves through technology. And look what we're doing again tens of thousands of years later. We're doing these. We haven't learned our lessons here on Earth. And that brings me to the Vedics, where they talk about just one pralaya, one creation, being 311 trillion, 40 billion years. So why are we jonesing about this? We just got to do our work. And that work is to find peace and to also speak your truth. Speak out. Even if you're going to be heard by no one, you may be planting a seed that someone else will get down the road. And I've had many people come up to me a year later, 2 years later, and say, you hit me with that chemtrail stuff and I just thought you were a kook, or you hit me with a flat earth and I didn't want to talk to you for 6 months. But I started looking into it when somebody else mentioned it or someone else said it, and I started researching it. So it wasn't me that actually got them to go, aha, but I planted a seed. And that's where I think we are right now. We're just seed planting in the greatest compost in the history of Earth since Atlantean times. And we're the new seeds. We're the new consciousness rising. So what we're doing is critically important, and it's courageous. And we could get whacked any time for disclosing what we're disclosing. And I'm amazed we haven't been shut down, but you're seeing YouTube and now in the fake news, they're demonetizing all the YouTube accounts. They're shutting down all these contrarians that are talking about all the false flags and all the crisis actors, and they're shutting down these websites with community strikes, because it isn't politically correct to talk about these things anymore. So you can see the slow boil going on, where one day we're not going to be able to talk about this anymore. So we have to get the word out. And even though you're speaking your truth, as Thomas Jefferson said, you got to have skin as thick as the bark of a pine, because it's not about you. It's about all of us. And this is where I get my reverence on. This is where I get my energy from. It's because we've been privileged enough, you and I, Mike, to be at the forefront of learning this stuff, that we have to sound the alarm. We have to be the ones to be the spokespersons, because if not us, then who, right?
Right. And it is a spiritual journey, Jamie, and I have explained this to many people. I've done shows on this. You have to do your inner work. It's a metaphysical learning lesson for your soul. And I also see where a lot of folks that are in the truth movement or the alternative research community, they're not connected into the spiritual aspects of this. They're still dealing with everything in a material, physical world from that perspective. There's a lot that can be gleaned from spending your time and being in that space or that place. But at the end of the day, you have to connect back to spirit. That's really what this is all about. So I agree with you on this. And I just want to also mention with regard to YouTube, it's become very, very serious, folks. So many of the channels that you would go to for alternative research or truth community stuff, YouTube has their heads in a vice. I do a blog, and I've been doing the blog for years. And what's happened, Jamie, over the last, I want to say 2 to 3 months, I will put a video up from a particular content provider, and only to have that video grayed out like a day or two later, and you go to that blog post, and it'll say that video has been removed. It's not the content provider that's removing it. This is YouTube taking this stuff down, because YouTube only wants the mainstream narrative to be put out there. And so they found all kinds of ways now, through very ambiguous language. When you go to sign up for a YouTube account, there's terms and conditions. It's a contract. You accept them in order to put videos up on YouTube. But the language is very, very ambiguous in many places, with these community strike guidelines and all that crap. They're just taking content down left and right. Some folks will talk about alternatives to YouTube and this and that and everything else. But the problem with that is, even if there is an alternative right now, it's very short-lived, because the beast that we're dealing with, it sucks everything in.
Yep.
It's not going to allow something to be a lone wolf out there to go up against it and to do it in a way where it has an impact. No, they're going to crush it or suck it in, buy it. This is the way it works. So it's very important that everybody understands. Like, I do my shows, and for those who haven't heard this yet, I received a letter from my music publisher, and YouTube had written to my music publisher and informed them that there were certain videos of mine that were not going to be monetized. And my shows are not monetized, but it
Right.
was a preemptive strike to me to say, if he decides to monetize, just let your client know that the following videos will not be monetized and he will not be making any money from it. That's the letter I received. And I'm not even monetized, but there was, like I said, a preemptive strike just to kind of let me know that if you're thinking about it, Mike, don't think about it, because that video, that one, and that one, and that one, those shows there, no, we're going to bury them. So this is what's going on. They're sitting on YouTube views. I have a Sage of Quay Facebook page. It's very different from my personal page, and it really mirrors my blog. Well, it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago where YouTube was unsubscribing people that were subscribed to my Sage of Quay Facebook page. I would go in there and I would see 24 people or so that I know would not have unsubscribed from the page unsubscribed. And I had to go back and re-invite those people back. 2 or 3 days later, the same thing happened again. So it's this little game that they're playing just to get under our skin. And that's what's happening. They are just poking at us. It's like the Chinese water torture thing. It's like the kid in school who sat behind you would poke you in the back with a pencil. This is what they're doing. And I've been affected by it. Many of us have been affected by it.
Well, and this is why I tell people, buy books. I mean, the internet's only been here since 1995, folks. They can shut it down tomorrow. And what information do we have? The ancients recorded their history on things called pyramids, which we still can't figure out how they built it, why they built it, or what it's for. And they left, 10,000 words. A picture's worth 10,000 words, and they use their hieroglyphics per 10,000 words there and told all these stories today, including flat Earth. What do we have today? Thumb drives. So get some books, folks. Get all this stuff down. Get as many books as you can, because our children are going to need to know this history. And you're going to say, when they shut down the internet or it becomes like China, which is happening very soon, as they're slow boiling us, I'm getting unsubbed. I'm getting my counts being lessened. I'm having people call me up and say, hey, you took me off. And I said, no, I didn't. Same thing's happening to all of us. And it's never been about the money for me either. It's been about getting it out there. But when I started to monetize it, I'm getting this not suitable for advertisers almost every single post I do, from Agenda 21 to directed energy weapons to how many secret societies can you name to why is the world legalizing marijuana at the same time? Not suitable for advertisers. And so, it's going on everywhere. But, get some books, folks. Get a library going and get some information for the future so that we can help explain and disseminate. And there's a lot of good books out there that last for hundreds and hundreds of years. Maybe not the acidic ones now, but something that we can have for the future. So if the internet is no longer viable, we do have this knowledge still preserved.
People say to me, Jamie, they'll say, Mike, you don't have a Kindle? I'm like, no, I don't have a Kindle because it's digital. And they can change whatever they want to change whenever they want to change it. You can read a book on a Kindle today. Tomorrow, if they decide that there's certain content within that book that is not what they want to have in that book, it's gone. But they can't do that with the actual physical book.
Right.
I won't go the electronic route. People will say I'm a dinosaur. Fine, call me a dinosaur. I would rather keep my physical books, my hard covers or my soft cover books, because I know that the words in there are not going to change because somebody doesn't like them. And that's the path we're on. Everything is being censored. Everything's being monitored. Everything's being surveilled. And they really, really have turned it up, Jamie, as we're talking about here. I think over the last 6 months, I would say that it's a whole different ball game.
Absolutely.
You had mentioned before we get started here that there's CRISPR technology, CRISPR, CRISPR technology. And you asked me if I knew something about it. I said a little bit, not a whole lot. And I figured I would give you the floor to explain to the audience what that is.
It's something I'm learning about too. Technology advances. Moore's law says computer processing doubles every year. Well, so does technology. And technology has been ever increasing in the biotechnology field, genetically modification, the human genome, genetically inherited diseases. All of these they've cracked the code. There was big celebrations about that and big conversations about whether to use embryos and whatnot for genome testing and whatnot. But I just got this book again, by Jennifer Doudna. Interesting. Jennifer A. I just noticed that. Doudna. Get it? DNA. It's called A Crack in Creation, Gene Editing, and the Unthinkable Power to control evolution. Interesting title. And in the prologue, she was one of the founders of this CRISPR technology, apparently. So she says that scientists, this is in her prologue, scientists have succeeded in bringing this primordial process fully under control. And my computer just froze up, but CRISPR, it's a nonsensical terminology if you do the acronym for it, so I'm not even going to go there. But scientists have succeeded in bringing this primordial process fully under control, using powerful biotechnology tools to tinker with DNA inside living cells. Scientists can now manipulate and rationally modify the genetic code that defines every species on the planet, including our own. And with this newest and arguably most effective genetically engineering tube, CRISPR, the genome and organism's entire DNA content, including all its genes, has become almost as edible as a simple piece of line text in Word document. As long as the genetic code for a particular trait is known, scientists can use CRISPR to insert, edit, and delete the associated gene in virtually any living plant's or animal's genome, and humans as well. This process is far simpler and more effective than any other gene manipulation technology in existence. Practically overnight, we have found ourselves on the cusp of a new age in genetic engineering and biological mastery, a revolutionary era in which the possibilities are limited only by our collective imagination. And then it goes on to say more and more about this technology being out of control because it's gotten into the hands where technology has advanced so fast. But in the laboratory, grown human cells in the gene editing technology can correct the mutations responsible for cystic fibrosis, sickle cell disease, and whatnot. So they're talking about all the cures, but we never cure anything. We always have disease. But it enables scientists to accomplish such feats by finding and fixing single incorrect letters of DNA out of 3.2 billion letters that make up the human genome. So basically, they're able to play God. They can humanize the DNA of pigs, give rise to hopes these animals might someday serve as organ donors for humans. And it goes on and on about all the positives. And then it asks the morality question, should we begin editing genes in unborn children to lower their lifetime risk of heart disease, Alzheimer's, etc.? The quest for perfection seems almost intrinsic to human nature, but if we start down this slippery slope, we may not like where it ends. Now, for the first time ever, we possess the ability to edit not only the DNA of every living human, but also the DNA of future generations. Hello.
Yeah. I mean, this is the whole transhumanism, right, agenda that's rolling out. And, the thing is, Jamie, what I tell folks that will listen is that the technologies that they have, technologies that they're already using, are so far advanced that it would make your head spin. So when they come out, when they start talking about CRISPR technology or, pick another type of technology, the truth of the matter is that they have been using that technology for a very, very long time before it ever kind of rolls out and leaks out to the public. By the time you start reading about it, I can almost guarantee you that where they are actually at with that technology is 10, 20, 30 years down the line. In other words, you're thinking 30 years out, they're already there. They have an agenda, they have an ideology, and they're going to roll it out. We're the experiment, the guinea pigs, and they're looking to see what happens. Well, what happens if we use CRISPR technology for this or that on the population? Well, let's see what happens. So, I mean, this is how they think. This is what they do. They don't look at us as special. They don't look at humanity as something that needs to be preserved. They look at humanity as something that is like a lab rat.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree with you, and that dovetails with 3 weeks ago, the front page of the New York Times, left-hand column, the paper of record, came up with Novartis has a new living cell gene therapy that's going to revolutionize treatments of cancer, right? These guys have been so bad of curing cancer or dealing with cancer, and all those, pink ribbons all those 300-pound football players are now wearing to cure cancer. And now they finally come up with this new type. Well, you read up of what this thing does is they're going in and they're taking out the T cells of your body, the immune system protectors of your body, sending it in frozen form to the Novartis labs and having it returned with reprogrammable chips with an on and off switch. that goes directly into your immune system. And they're saying they're going to start with children to make it preventative for cancer for them in the future. I mean, this is as sadistic and as evil as you can possibly imagine. And again, it follows what William Carr, the admiral, said in his book about the Luciferian conspiracy. And their number one Luciferian creed says, which he puts in his book, I will enslave the human race under a totalitarian dictatorship and deprive them of the physical and mental liberties and so negate their ability to use their intellect and free will as God intended. This was proposed by the United Nations World Health and World Mental Health Organizations. And it says, permanent peace shall be assured by a king despot exercising absolute despotism over his subjects. The Luciferian protocols, it's the same protocols of the Elder Zion, but it's actually, he says it's the Luciferian protocols disguised as the Elders of Zion protocol, that the Luciferian totalitarian dictatorship established on this earth will have at its head a king despot whose will is to be enforced by satanic despotism. Luciferian idealism requires that in the final stage of the conspiracy, only the governing body shall have, quote, liberty to enjoy the pleasures and lusts of the flesh and the right to gratify their carnal desires. All others are to be made into human cattle and enslaved physically, mentally, and spiritually in order to ensure permanent peace and social security. Procreation, get this, will be strictly limited to types and numbers determined scientifically as sufficient to fill the requirements to the state. According to Bertrand Russell on page 49 of his book, The Impact of Science on Society, less than 5% of males and 30% of females will be selected from the goyim, goyim's a Jewish term for cattle, to be used for breeding purposes, and reproduction will be achieved by artificial insemination practiced on an international scale. Investigations has proved that experiments are now being conducted in Canada and the United States to determine if semen of human males cannot be preserved and kept fertile indefinitely. I mean, it goes on and on. There's like 12 platforms. It insists that all goyim will be unable and unfit to serve the state efficiently shall be destroyed. This diabolical principle is being made acceptable in the minds of innocent human beings by presented as mercy killing, the scientific name, which is euthanasia. And we're seeing out here in California, they're promoting euthanasia for the elderly and whatnot. So it's following the plank of the Luciferian creed, which is very just mind-boggling and disturbing in so many different ways. But I'm a realist too, Mike. I'm not denying it's not happening. I can see with my own eyes that this is going down, and I'm not sure, how to physically manifest change in order to stop it other than accept what I can, change what I can, and scream from high heaven until they take the last breath away from me. You cannot shut me up.
No, you just have to keep going. You have to say something. You have to open your mouth. You have to push back, and you have to fight. Now, will you win the fight? You may not win the fight, but at least you go down knowing that you did everything you possibly could for good. You just can't roll over.
No, you can't. They're allowing you to roll over. I mean, go run up your credit cards. It's priceless. Take your kids to the game to run up your debt in your future. This is about the free will. I mean, this is really, biblical times. If you want to look at it that way, that we have free will and we can choose to fight. But it's really sad that humanity, with all this information, with the internet available, with all these shows out there, humanity's not choosing to fight. And then every time they organize, they've got agent provocateurs. They've got all these controlled oppositions that you keep running into. But Mike, I think we're kind of winning in a way because my goal when I started this was to kick frickin' Goliath in the shin once I realized what I was up against. And by YouTube now reacting to us, we're actually kicking them in the shin. They're actually responding to us where for years it was just silence. And now Big Brother is actually looking at us and saying, we're going to start controlling you. You're doing too much. You're getting a little too far out there. And so I think the collective consciousness of those that are awakening. And the other point I really want to make is, and I keep going back to is, we're said to be only using less than 12% of our brain, the smartest maybe 15%. So anybody that says, believe, the word believe means belie, B-E-L-I-E. We don't know what our power is. And that's why they've had to carry out this deception like flat earth to keep us from knowing that the whole universe is conspiring to assist us, that all the luminaries in the sky and whatnot is rotating around us to help us. We have more power than we know. We just have to learn to access that power. And they're afraid. They are so afraid they have to hide in these guys, these Jesuits and these Luciferians and all the rest of these guys that are controlling this, because they're afraid of us. So fear means face everything and respond. Fear means facts, evidence, academia, and research. Fear means face everything and respond, and also facts, evidence appearing real. It's not flee everything and run. And so I've changed fear around into making it a positive. And so they don't hold fear over me anymore. You can't stop me. I won't shut up. So I got a question for you, Mike. If you're in your sanity, does that mean you're insane?
If I'm in my play on words.
If you're insecure, this is how they do it. If you're in your security, does that mean you're insecure?
Yeah. I see where you're going.
If you say hi to somebody, what do you say? You tell them to go to hell. Hello.
Yeah, hello. Right.
In schools, they cast spells. It's right in front of us when we open our eyes and we learn that we languish in our languages. And one of the things of the Georgia Guidestones, getting back to, was they called for a universal language. And this is what English is. It's a bastardization of the ancient languages, which the phonics of it had meaning. The Phoenicians, the Hebrew Kabbalah, all these ancient languages had spiritual meanings. And we have to get back to that. We have to change up our own languages, start creating our own words and defining our own terms, and I keep saying to everybody, the answer is to be the author of your own authority, and don't take shit from anybody. And if it means going up against the winds of change that no one wants to deal with, so be it. I'll step up to the plate and do it every single day, because this isn't about me. This is about all of us. And I'll fight the good fight, and I'll take the consequences of it, and I'll do it every time, because this is what we're all supposed to be doing. And by our actions, we will be known. And this is our will, and we have free will. So you doing this, I honor this, and all these other people that are doing this great work and stepping up the plate at the expense of their own being, I honor you guys, man. It's hard work, and it's thankless, as you know, except for a few people. It's really thankless work, and it's really hard. And this is, I know you want to wrap it up here in a little bit, but going out in society now, I can't go out anymore. I can't go to the parties and talk about the 49ers football games and what the latest news in Hollywood was. It doesn't resonate with me anymore. Whereas before I was one of them. And so I never judge people. I don't condone or look down on people, because we have been masterfully and artfully mind programmed since the days of Edward Bernays and Lippmann and those guys with propaganda. So now they're using frequencies on the social devices that are altering our DNA sequences and altering our frequencies. They control our minds. They know us better than we do. They spend billions and billions and billions of dollars every year for decades and decades and decades studying what's called brain mapping. What is brain mapping? That's studying between the ears and behind your eyes. So what do you think they've learned about us over all this time? We're up against, but they can't, they're so afraid. This is what I keep getting back to. So why are they so afraid? Well, that means I got to develop my own inner consciousness. I got to develop my own inner self. And that's the work that goes. It always comes back on my shoulders. So I always have control of the steering wheel, or at least I try.
No, you're spot on, Jamie, because if they thought you were useless and had no power, they wouldn't spend 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year trying to pollute and contaminate and steer your mind. It's plain and simple. The reason why they have this perpetual motion machine in place is because they know that humans have an innate power. Their job, they see it as making sure that you never become aware of that innate power that you have. So, it's really, it's a fight. It's an unbelievable fight. I just wish that more people would wake up to it, Jamie. It's kind of like, there's even people in the truth community and the alternative research community that some of them are going to get upset that I'm going to say this, but, they're really good at what they do, but they can run the football for about 50 yards, and at the 50-yard line, they fumble. It's like they don't realize there's another 50 yards. When I talk about it in those terms, what I'm referring to is it's going back to what I said before about the spiritual aspect of it. You must have the spiritual aspect. That's what rounds this thing out. If you're just going to invest in the material world, the physical, what goes on in the physical world, and major in that, and again, a lot of that is important, but to really, really break through, it's more than that. It's much more than that.
Yeah, and the word spirit, espirare, means respire, means to breathe. Back to Om, the first breath. And so we have to, it's all an inward journey. This is all about our own development as an individual, but they collectively are trying to steal our souls. And they will if we stay dumb and numb, as I call it, and not wake up to our higher potentials, our higher beings. And this is why, going back to the ancients, this is why I believe flat earth, the meme, was brought to us. I mean, for 5,000 years, the Vedics, the Chaldeans, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Native Americans, the Scandinavians, the Norwegians, all of them had flat earth cosmology, theocosmology, that we're much bigger. There's a much bigger story going on here. And when I learned that, I became so much more better at letting things go and not worrying, sweating the small stuff. And I became more empowered to say, whoa, we're being privileged. Absolutely, you and I are being privileged to be accessing this information. And then it becomes free will, whether we opt to look at it or whether we opt to not. And I've had friends that started with GMOs, getting into that. Then they got into geoengineering, and then they started drinking. And then they met me and they got into a whole nother world. But, this is about your own purification of yourself by taking all this in. And I highly recommend, whether it be meditation, going into nature, because this stuff is overwhelming. It'll knock you down. It'll take your body apart. It'll mind fuck you like nothing else has ever done. So you're going to have to develop some spirituality along the way to be able to do this. And in this world where, like you said, we're lacking in spirit, we're lacking in spirituality, it becomes just this one-on-one. And then when I connect with people like you, and I connect with other people that are helping promote the anti-geoengineering and whatnot, I realize that community is growing, and whatever number it's growing, I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to celebrate just a few of us getting it. And if that's the way it is, but I'm not going to worry about anymore with everybody getting it, because you're wasting your time. We passed a Measure S in Mendocino County 2 years ago, which I helped put through. And it basically declared that the county had rights superseding state and federal law. It was the first time in the country that we also gave nature rights to exist in court. It was a historic document that got passed in November 2014. And after it got passed, we were supposed to write all these community bill of rights in each of our communities in Mendocino, and everybody went to sleep. They all went back to sleep, and nothing was done about it. And I went, whoa, here we just, Mendocino County was the first to ban GMOs. And I thought we had this thing going, but boy, I tell you, it's like herding cats with these people, because everybody's got an opinion and everybody's got their way. And it's just the way it is. So I broadcast out. I try and put the truth out as I see it. I say I'm wrong when I'm wrong, but this information is there. And so I just encourage those to stay strong, find others in your community, and, grow your own food. I mean, this is one of the greatest things we can be doing right now. Know where your water sources are, because water's they're doing some really wild things to water lately, and they're unprivatizing our water rights where we live. But growing your own food, to know where your food comes from, is critical to build your immune systems and that of your children. And, that's all you can do for now, and keep fighting the good fight.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Jamie. So now, for folks to connect with you and to find out more about your research and your videos and the work that you're doing, where can they find you?
Basically, I've got 3 channels. One is the YouTube channel, which is also my website, and it's APLANE truth.info for both the YouTube and the website. My other blog is tabublog.com. TABU, taboo, stands for Towards a Better Understanding, .com as well. So that's where you can find me. And please, get on the YouTubes and help with the comments. Look at the comment sections, folks. There's some great people doing work. And it's really, the other part of it's really heartening, Mike, is that when I'm seeing the comments and people tell me, man, I needed to hear that, or man, I'm not alone, or when I did my piece on touchless torture, all these people that are being touchless tortured wirelessly by the government and other operations are saying, someone is speaking. Thank you for bringing this out. This was happening to me, and I've been suffering by myself, and just, I keep telling them, you're not alone anymore. We're here to help. And that's our role. And whether the pebble with the water ripples out far enough, I'm not concerned with that anymore. At one time I was. It's now about just doing the right thing, speaking truth to power, and just having the guts to step up to the plate in such crisis times as these. There's never been times like these before for tens of thousands of years. We are especially privileged to be among these times, as weird as that sounds, with all the doomsday porn we've been talking about today, but we're here to make a difference. We're here to learn our lessons. And so this is a great time to be alive.
And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.